Sean Wargo, Principal of Apogee Insight. Welcome to ISE 2026 and to the AV Magazine booth.
Thank you very much, Guy. Pleasure to be here, as always.
Thank you. Now, I have a very big question. I'm puzzled. I know there have been some predictions that the industry is going to grow over the next 5 years. Everyone's seen the figures, the billions of dollars, but I also know from my own experience that many of the vendors' representatives that we saw in the display market serving corporate and education, there seem to be layoffs. How do the two things fit together?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think industry figures are always meant to represent the total, and in the case of Pro AV, we can all agree that we have a very, very diverse industry with lots of different sectors, lots of different technology companies, hardware, solution areas, vertical markets. So I think what you're reflecting on is, as you look at the average growth rate that has been put out there, around, let's say, 3 to 5%, depending on the source. Avixa has theirs, Coretta has theirs, etc. That means at a 3.5, if you look at a bell curve, you've got some companies certainly doing very, very well. Let's call it 20% growth. But that means you also have a fairly significant number in decline. And I think what we've seen over the last few years is really that diversity, that variability play itself out. You've got some categories that are in price compression. They had oversupply. Displays, for example, conferencing collaboration technologies have really compressed a lot, partially as they become easier to use, easier to deploy, pushed more into a volume kind of mode. So I think you're seeing that play out. I would absolutely agree that in this environment, we certainly hear plenty of companies that have struggled, particularly in 2025, where you had the added headwind and challenge of a tariff situation that was creating a lot of uncertainty in pricing and therefore demand for the buyer, who said, I don't know what I'm going to end up spending, so I'm just going to hold off a little bit. I think that gets better in 26, even though we'll still feel the effects of that price hit. But I think it's a fair question, but I would say that what it requires necessitates, and one of the reasons I formed Apogee Insights is to really drill in and look at your particular sector. We call it a TAM, SAM, SOM, total addressable, service addressable market, and service obtainable market. That helps you really whittle in and understand where I'm situated, how does that market look, what's its growth rate. That allows you to better peg as an organization to what's going to happen.
So I understand the answer that some companies are in growth, some in decline, there's price compression, you need to look more specifically.
Yes.
I guess the worry I had when I saw the redundancies, even though I understand that it varies, was how can we be sure when we read these growth forecasts that there's no double counting in one sector, undercounting in another sector? How do you cross-check for reliability so that people can be confident?
Absolutely. What you're pointing to is a couple of different things. So in a market, as we just noted, that's complex. One of those additional complexities is it's a multi-tier market. It's manufacture, well, let's go lower. It's componentry, it's manufacturer, it's distribution, it's integration, and or it's sometimes a direct. So what your methodologies have to do is account for the fact that product is flowing through. One way to do that, probably the most common, is you start with what manufacturers say they are shipping. So that kind of goes to the source of products, says, okay, all the companies are saying it's this much. You then apply markups for the value that's attached to the products as they flow through the system. You would be making clearly a very big mistake if you just said, I'm going to add everything up. I'm going to take what distributors say they're selling, what integrators say they're selling, what manufacturers say they're selling. You would be double, triple counting, right? So I think that's the key. It's methodological rigor, which requires, I think, as you're evaluating, and even as you're building up your methodology, is sort of a mixed approach. I have done a lot of shipment data programs in my career, and that is often used as the bellwether. I think the biggest risk for that methodology is overstatement by a manufacturer who wants to use their submission as a way of suggesting larger market share. So you have to have checks to that. One of those is getting distributor data. Some of it can be data that comes from end users in terms of their reported purchases. There's also other data sources such as integration project management platforms like a JetBuilt D-Tools X10, which is a neighbor here of yours here at ISE.
Well, we're just opposite JetBuilt.
Right next to JetBuilt. So all of that data helps you better triangulate. And I think that's where either your embedded market intelligence staff at your organization or a consultant like an Apogee can help you kind of put together the figures to make sure that you're accounting for any redundancy. But it's an astute question, and it's one that should always be asked when you're evaluating. I used to work for Avixa. I know this is something that when I was there, we took to great heart. We made sure that our providers of data were helping us through to avoid that double, triple count. That methodology did by starting, as we talked about, with shipment layer and then layering on top. So that's what helps you. But in the end, it's the same question of, well, for my company situation, what's relevant? What methodology? How should I look at the data? How do I size to best apply to my situation in this diverse landscape, since it is such a variable experience in this market?
And do you have a projection figure for AV Magazine and the AV media market?
AV Magazine and the AV media market itself? Ooh, so there's a couple of different sectors that are related to you. I think the one that we're hearing talked about a lot is broadcast AV, and that capability of creating content, distributing content. That is where we're seeing a larger than average industry growth rate. You can see estimates of between 5 and 6% for that area. So I would use that, but the counterpoint is traditional media, traditional broadcast, which had also been included, is in a state of decline. So there's probably an averaging out. We need to do a Samsung for an AV magazine, but clearly I think the opportunity, generally speaking, is the broadcast notion for enterprises that are trying to create content, make it relevant, tell a story out to the market, use social, use different platforms to get message. Definitely a growing market, as we're seeing here at ISE.
Well, Sean, we just have a little bit of time. Thank you very much for joining us. I greatly appreciate you being here and sharing your insight.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.